Have you ever felt a strange connection to a time or place you've never visited? Dr. Alan Haimes spent his childhood haunted by vivid dreams of a desert, a mysterious voice calling his name Suliman, and a death he could never escape. Years later, on a trip to Egypt with his wife, Alan began to experience a powerful sense of deja vu. Join us as we dive into an extraordinary story of reincarnation, past life memories, and the haunting question: are we truly connected to our pasts? Before we continue, if you have not done so, make sure to subscribe, like and set notification bell on so that you can continue receiving more videos like this one. Dr. Alan Haimes had a recurring dream that started when he was a young boy. In these dreams, he saw himself in a desert, wrapped in the clothes worn by desert dwellers. These dreams usually ended when he sank into what he thought was sand, while hearing a woman's voice calling, "Suliman." Each time he woke up just before he died, feeling disturbed and drenched in sweat. These dreams occurred frequently when he was a boy. He did not know what Suliman meant. Was it a person, a place, or something completely different? Apart from studying medicine, he also studied Middle Eastern archaeology and developed an almost obsessive interest in the pyramids. He had visited the Middle East, but for some reason had not fulfilled his wish of traveling to Egypt. For his 40th birthday, his wife presented him with a trip to Egypt. Soon after, they traveled there together. During a boat trip up the Nile, they stopped at a town called Edfu. As they strolled hand in hand through the narrow streets, both of them suddenly had the feeling that it was all very familiar to them. To Judith, it seemed like she could even understand the language of the local people. When they strolled through the Temple of Luxor, Alan noticed that the Egyptian tourist guide looked exactly like one of the people he had seen in his dreams. He confided in his wife his knowledge of having lived in Egypt over 1,000 years before, and that the tourist guide had been his brother in a past life. His older brother's name had been Aran in his dreams. Then the following happened. When the tourist guide laid eyes on Alan, he immediately paused in the middle of his speech and gazed into Dr. Haimes' eyes, as though hypnotized. Then everyone else also looked at the American, who had apparently made the tourist guide lose his train of thought. Alan felt a little disturbed by this and led his wife away from the group. They both caught a taxi back to the boat on the Nile. Alan could not stop talking about his past life in Egypt. In the evening, they received a call from the boat reception, telling them that they had a guest waiting to see them. When they arrived at the reception, a man got up from his seat and came over to meet them. It was the Egyptian tourist guide whom they had met that afternoon. Judith saw Alan go white. The Egyptian held out his hand and introduced himself as Emil. He told them he had something important to discuss with them. He mentioned that he was a Christian, but that he believed in reincarnation. Disturbing dreams about his past lives had plagued him in his youth. Emil said, "Today, when I looked into Alan's eyes during the talk at the temple, I knew that we had once been related to each other. I know that we lived in Edfu about 1,000 years ago." Emil now described many events from their past life together, while Alan noted it all down on the back of an envelope. Judith had also become a member of that family in those days by marrying Alan. They had both moved to Luxor after the wedding. Alan then asked him which profession he had followed in those days. Emil told him that Alan had become a writer. Emil, being the oldest of the family, would traditionally have taken up this profession and followed in the steps of his father, but his right hand was crippled and not suited to writing. It had also been Alan's job in those days to count the sacks of wheat when they were delivered. He had to sort them out and arrange for their transport to the grain silos. It was there that he had fallen into the wheat and had drowned in it. Alan had been under the impression that he had died in quicksand, but it had never really made sense to him. Now he finally knew the truth of the matter. Emil continued his story, saying that he and Alan's wife had accompanied him to the wheat silos. When he had fallen into the wheat, his wife had let out a terrible scream and had called out his name, Suliman. When Alan heard this, he had to sit down. He had finally found out who it was that had called Suliman in his dreams. It had been his wife from his past life, whom he had once again married in his present life. Judith and Alan became good friends with Emil and visited him several times in the following years. Do you find yourself being particularly interested in a certain time in history, or a particular historical event, or even in a certain famous person from the past? Perhaps this interest is so pronounced that you buy yourself books relating to that historical event or person. Sometimes such an interest can become a real passion, or even an obsession. There are people who read or watch relevant films about everything to do with Alexander the Great, for instance, or about the Roman emperors or Napoleon, Metternich, or Bismarck, about the 30-Year War, the 7-Year War, or the Second World War. There are collectors who only collect things from a certain time in history, for instance, articles about the Biedermeier era, or of the time of the great founders or Art Nouveau, based on results from past life regressions that have been done. These people really did live in those particular times relating to their present-day interests. We tend to be drawn to things that were dear to us, or to those that caused us a lot of pain in the past. If you have not done so, make sure to subscribe, like, and set notification bell on, so that you can continue receiving more videos like this one.